Alright, so I recently reached top 500 in VGC, Gen 9 Regulation I, Best of 1 VGC. And as a result of that, I wanted to go over, this is another competitive Pokemon one, I wanted to go over support Pokemon. Basically the idea of support Pokemon, and I just wanted to go over the current support Pokemon meta. I think that's worth talking about. I think there's some interesting things. And I wanted to sort of give my personal ranking of the current meta support Pokemon, as well as a little bit of an explanation as to what they do. Real simple. So, the obvious number one choice, it's well known, it's a VGC classic at this point. It's Incineroar. As expected, Incineroar is still king. It's a Pokemon that I'm not a big Incineroar guy. I did pick Incineroar as my starter in Gen 7, but I'm not particularly an Incineroar fan. I don't even really like it in competitive, but there's no denying it's very good in the current meta. I would say it's probably the number one support Pokemon. What it does is, what it's well known to do at this point. It has Intimidate, so it comes in and it reduces the physical attack of both opposing Pokemon by one stage. Effectively, this really makes it harder to use physical attackers. Now, there are still some physical attackers that are seeing pretty significant play, but it does put a significant hamper on those, and there are a decent amount that see significant play even despite that, so it's good for dealing with those, The thing that it's really especially good for dealing with are two of the most annoying Pokemon in the meta, those being Calyrex Ice and then Calyrex Shadow. Before we get into why, I also should mention the other big main tool it has, which is, of course, Fake Out. Fake Out is probably the second most important move in the entire VGC metagame after Protect, which I fucking hate, by the way. I don't like Protect. I think Protect is a blight. I understand why it's there, but I also I really don't like playing around it. But, we have Urshifu now, so it's not as bad as it was. But after Protect, Fake Out is probably the most important move in the game for its ability to stop one of your opponent's Pokemon from moving just for an entire turn, unless they're running one specific item, or unless they protect against it, which still stops them from moving. Fake Out is a very, 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 very good move, and honestly, the combination of Intimidate and Fake Out is probably 80% of the reason Incineroar is even used. Other than that, it almost always runs Parting Shot to lower attack and special attack by an additional stage and switch out. But other than those two, you'll usually see it with maybe Will-O-Wisp and then just an attack, either Flare Blitz or Knockoff. But now, to go further into its positives before we start talking about some of the negatives with the Pokemon, like I said, it's very, very good at stopping Calyrex, both versions of Calyrex, Calyrex Shadow and Calyrex Ice. For Calyrex, for one, that's because of its typing, obviously. Fire is resistant against Ice, which means it resists Calyrex Ice's Glacial Lance, and then Dark is resistant against Calyrex Shadow's Astral Barrage. So it can take both of their special moves relatively well, and then also threaten them offensively, since, Ice is weak to Fire, and Ghost Psychic is actually double weak to Dark. Now, they will usually Terra in response to an Incineroar, so it's not as good offensively as it maybe was last generation, but it's still quite an effective counter, especially against Calyrex Ice. I'd say it's a little bit worse against Calyrex Shadow because, well, it does have the double super effectiveness. Calyrex Shadow is probably going to Terrastalize, and then it's just more of a neutral matchup. But against Calyrex Ice specifically, it's very, very good because it also has Intimidate to lower the attack. So even if it doesn't get anything else done, it at least makes its attack a little bit weaker. And it also has Will-O-Wisp, so it can cut into the thing's physical attack unless it Terra Fires. It can take their item with Knockoff, and then just, Parting Shot to lower their offensive stats even further. Also, if either of them Terra to anything that's not Ghost, then Fake Out will stop them for a turn, and it's very good at dealing with both versions of Calyrex, which I think is one of the main reasons it's as good as it is. But also there are a lot of good physical attackers in the meta. Zacian and Zamazenta are still big. Groudon's around. Rillaboom, it matches up pretty well against Rillaboom. Not as amazing as you'd think. Rillaboom does high horsepower, but it's got some pretty decent matchups. It's I think it is probably the best support Pokemon in the current metagame. But it does have a significant flaw. And that's kind of the ethos of this video. See, when I was running my VGC team, the support Pokemon I used was not a Pokemon that you're going to see on this list. It was actually Sableye. And Sableye does not have any of the problems that any of these Pokemon are going over, so that's also kind of why I wanted to go over this, to show, like, this is the current support Pokemon meta in VGC, but there are reasons not to pick each of these Pokemon, and that's why, you know, someone like me might choose to run something off meta. The problems with Incineroar are primarily, it's really, really, really good on the first turn it switches in, but it's not as good after that. It falls off really hard after its first turn, because on its first turn, it gets the Intimidate off, which is very valuable, and then it can Fake Out, which is also very, very valuable. But Incineroar is not incredibly fast. It's decently fast, but it's not super fast. I think it's like base 90 speed, might even not be that. I don't remember, and I'm not going to look it up. It's got above average speed, but not the most incredible speed, which means it's liable to getting outsped by a lot of the very meta things. And that means it can't necessarily get off its parting shot on subsequent turns. And it also doesn't have the most attack, so while very defensively weak things could still suffer from a Flare Blitz, or, you know, anything that doesn't want to lose its item, doesn't necessarily want to get hit with a knockoff, it's not really an offensive threat in its own right. So after its first turn, it doesn't really tend to have much to do. Like, it's already used its Fake Out, it's already got off its Intimidate, so your options are basically Parting Shot and hope you move first, or attack and probably not even pick up a KO. It's a lot more limited in what it can do on subsequent turns. It can also run Will-O-Wisp to hurt physical attackers, but generally physical attackers are probably already going to be switching out anyway because the Intimidate stat drops, so a lot of people don't even bother to run that. So the main problem with Incineroar is it's very good on the turn you switch it in, but it's often not really able to get much done on subsequent turns, and you kind of just have to switch it out, which wastes a turn you could be doing more valuable things with. After Incineroar, probably the second most, the number two, probably the second most good, the second best support Pokemon in the current VGC meta is Regulation I, by the way, Gen 9 Regulation I. It's probably Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl came around in Generation 8, so he's a relatively new kid on the block. But he has something you're going to see a lot more of on this list, which is Prankster. The ability Prankster, which makes all your non-damaging moves move first. They have priority. So unless someone else also uses a priority move, they'll always move first. Now, one big flaw that Grimmsnarl has is I don't think it has Fake Out. If it does, I certainly didn't see it run it very much. I do not think it has Fake Out. That's honestly probably the main reason Incineroar is a better Pokemon, just because Fake Out is such a good move. But the main thing that Grimmsnarl is here to offer is screen support. Grimmsnarl is probably the best screen setter in the game. Screens being Light Screen and then Reflect, which respectively cut the damage of all special moves and all physical moves in half for, I think it's 5 turns counting the turn you activate it. And then there's Light Clay, which is an item you can run to increase that to 8 turns. Oftentimes you don't even need to run Light Clay because VGC games tend to be over pretty quick. Like, a lot of games that I played were over in the first 5 or 6 turns. Sometimes games do stretch out to 8 turns, so it could be worth running Light Clay, but it's honestly kind of a your call type deal. Other than screen support, Grimmsnarl also does have access to Parting Shot, and unlike Incineroar, its Parting Shot will always go first because of Prankster. Other than that, it has access to Thunder Wave for a little bit of speed control. That's always useful. And its attack is actually pretty decent, base 120. I believe that's slightly better than Incineroar's. Don't quote me on that. But it does have relatively decent attack that allows it to run at least one attacking move. Usually it's going to be running Spirit Break, which is its special move, although they did give it to other Pokemon Iron Valiant this generation. Spirit Break is a fairy move. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but it can still be useful for something like Koraidon that it's double super effective against. Or even Miraidon that it's single super effective against. But the main good thing about Spirit Break is it lowers the affected Pokemon's special attack by 1. Now, because it's an attack, it doesn't get priority due to Prankster, but it's nice to have at least one attacking option, and that does still provide a variety of different things that can be useful to the team. Lastly, its typing is very good, actually. It's very good. Fairy Dark. The Dark typing means it can probably take Calyrex, Shadow, Astral Barrage very consistently. Like, after a light screen, I don't even think a +3 Astral Barrage can consistently one-shot. So it's taking that Astral Barrage very, very well. It's not as good against Calyrex Ice because of Prankster, but because of Prankster, it can also move first in Trick Room, which Calyrex Ice likes to run. And, it can set up the Reflect and probably take one unboosted one. It can throw down a Thunder Wave. It can Parting Shot. So it's got some things it can do against that. It's not as good against Calyrex Ice specifically as Incineroar, but it is very good against Calyrex Shadow, and it's good against plenty of other things in the meta. A lot of Dragon types like Koraidon and Miraidon. And, that Thunder Wave for speed control was also very, very useful. Not like Fake Out levels are useful, but it's the closest approximation you're going to get. The main thing you're using it for, though, is the screen support to effectively have all damage on the physical, special, or potentially even both sides for potentially the rest of the game. The downsides of Grimmsnarl, in my opinion, though, it's mainly just there for the screens. There's not a ton else that it's super good at. Like I said, its attack is decent, but there are so many. You're not using it for its attack. There are so many other good physical attackers, and the fact that it's generally also only running a 75 base power Spirit Break with probably no attack investment means it's not really capable of dealing any damage. Like, Incineroar isn't either necessarily, but a Flare Blitz in Sun or a knockoff can get a lot more utility than a Spirit Break probably. And also because of Prankster, Grimmsnarl's Thunder Waves and other support moves like Parting Shot actually don't affect Dark-type Pokemon. So, other than setting screens, it just doesn't really excel at anything. So, basically, if you can deal with screens, then you've dealt with everything really dangerous that Grimmsnarl is able to offer. It doesn't have anything that's super valuable like Fake Out or Intimidate. It just sets screens, and then maybe does a few other things in the background, like throw down a few Thunder Waves or Parting Shots. Screens can be very valuable. Like I said, I think this is the second best support Pokemon in the entire metagame, but there are ways to deal with it. For one, some Pokemon are just so blatantly powerful that they can one-shot things even through screens. Something like Choice Specs Miraidon probably could get it done, or if you manage to boost up Calyrex Ice or even a Calyrex Shadow, they could potentially just kill things even through the screens. Alternatively, what I did, and this isn't by any means a common strategy, but it is something you can do, and the fact that it exists means I think it's worth pointing out. You can actually run the move Brick Break, a 75 base power fighting move, which instantly breaks screens. There are a few other techs you can use to get around them, like Defog or Court Change, but all of those are pretty niche. Again, a very good Pokemon, but it does have its flaws, and like I said, there are plenty of ways to play around it. If you run Dark types, if you run Brick Break or some way of getting around screens, or if you just run things that can set up and KO even through screens. I think those are all going to be very effective at dealing with Grimmsnarl. After those two, we've got 3 Gen 5 Pokemon in a row. Gen 5 was a very good generation for support Pokemon. That was actually when Sableye got Prankster. A lot of things got Prankster. And the next Pokemon on the list is also a Prankster Pokemon, as is the following one. But the next Pokemon on the list is an absolute classic. It's Whimsicott. Now, I like Whimsicott, I do. I actually used a Cottony on my Little Cup team that I got to top 500. Whimsicott does not have particularly high stats. Its defensive stats are decent, but not amazing. Its offensive stats are pretty low. It does have very good speed, but it honestly doesn't even really need it because it primarily is relying on Prankster to go first anyway. Now, it also doesn't have Fake Out, but it does have an almost equally valuable move, Tailwind. Now, Tailwind is one of the two... Tailwind and Trick Room are basically the two top number one speed control moves in the entire game. Like, Tailwind will effectively guarantee that unless your opponent uses Trick Room or a priority move, you will always go first with every single one of your Pokemon, effectively. And not only does Whimsicott have it, it has Prankster Tailwind, which means it can actually set a Tailwind before another really, really fast Pokemon. And then, so even if your opponent's running like something that's obscenely fast, like a Choice Scarfer, Tailwind will still be set before that. And so potentially, with Whimsicott, you could even be in a situation like your opponent could have an insane like Choice Scarf Calyrex Shadow Rider, something that's like just absolutely like bonkers levels of fast, and with priority Tailwind, if you have something that's just kind of fast, you could still outspeed that. Like, that's how good Tailwind is. Prankster Tailwind is the main reason you're using Whimsicott, to be honest, but it does have a few other things. It has access to Taunt, so it's good at... It's theoretically good at countering other support Pokemon, although, like I said, probably the best two support Pokemon in the game right now are Incineroar and Grimmsnarl, both of which are Dark types, so they are immune to Prankster Taunt, which makes it a little bit less useful. But it also has a Moonblast, as it also likes to run one attack. Moonblast is not the most specially offensive thing in the game. It's pretty weak on the special offensive side, actually, but Moonblast is good for taking down Dark types as well as Dragon types. Good. I've gotten caught unawares by Moonblast when I was expecting more of a pure support Pokemon, so it's a good option to have. And then in the last slot, this thing honestly doesn't have a ton to do. I think it can run Thunder Wave. It can definitely run either Thunder Wave or Stun Spore. That's kind of the last thing. But the main thing you're using Whimsicott for is primarily just for the Tailwind. That's really the main draw here. And it's good defensive typing. Means it'll most likely be able to survive a hit. People like to run it with the Covert Cloak so that it can even ignore being fake outed and just really guarantee that Tailwind, and it's a Tailwind bot. Its weaknesses are essentially that, well, like I said, it's a Tailwind bot. Moonblast is a backup option. Thunder Wave is not really a necessary form of speed control when you're already running Tailwind. You can run like Leech Seed, but I don't think anyone really ran. I didn't see anyone running Leech Seed. It does not. It's defensively pretty decent. Offensively, it's kind of trash. It has Moonblast as kind of a consolation prize. Deal decent but not amazing damage against super effective targets. It lives and dies by its ability to use Tailwind, and it is the best user of Tailwind, but that's kind of all it does. Directly behind it is a Pokemon that I saw less than Whimsicott, and oddly enough had a little bit less trouble with than Whimsicott, despite it nominally being a better Tailwind user, that being Tornadus. Actually, it was the standard form of Tornadus. It was not Therian, because the standard form also has Prankster. Prankster is just such a good support ability. So many good support Pokemon have it, and Tornadus is probably the next best Tailwind user after Whimsicott, which is ironic because Tornadus is probably an overall better Pokemon than Whimsicott. Unlike Whimsicott, who has Tailwind and some other stuff in case you felt like doing something else, Tornadus has Prankster Tailwind, but it also has Taunt, like Whimsicott, but that has the same problem as Whimsicott's Taunt. But then it also has a Bleakwind Storm, a flying spread move, and unlike all the previous Pokemon on this list, it's offensive stat, I think, is base 130. It's 120 or 130, I don't fully remember. But it's high enough to actually get some real offensive utility out of Bleak Wind Storm. A lot of people actually do run it kind of especially offensive. So I guess in that way you could say it's not a pure support Pokemon, but it's a prankster user that's primarily there for Tailwind. You've got access to Thunder Wit. Actually, no, I don't think you do have access to Thunder Wave. I don't think you have access to that. That's just a straight up not true thing. But other than Bleak Wind Storm and Tailwind and maybe Taunt, the other thing that I tended to see it running like a surprising amount of was fuck. Oh, what was it? Lost my fucking train of thought. I'm sorry. Bleak Wind Storm, Tailwind, and Taunt with Prankster for Tailwind and Taunt. The other thing that I tended to see Tornadus running was actually Rain Dance. Rain Dance was interesting. I think the main thing it was there for was probably Koraidon, and then secondarily it was good against Groudon. Because people tended to pair it with Urshifu Water. Urshifu Water is a very good Pokemon, but it doesn't like running into Koraidon because Urshifu Water likes running Choice Band. But then Surging Strikes does pretty negligible damage in Sun. So being able to reset the weather to one that actually boosts the damage of the already very powerful Surging Strikes, which also hits through Protect. It's a very useful combo, and just being able to get rid of Sun in general is also very good against Koraidon and Groudon. The reason that I've rated Tornadus as lower than Whimsicott, despite nominally doing a lot more than it, is because of its typing. Mono Flying is not a good typing. Like it's just straight up not good. It gets absolutely stomped. Like I said, people tend to run it offensive, and the reason for that is it also has pretty poor defensive stats. So if it runs into anything that's super effective, which a lot of things are, rock moves, electric moves, ice moves, it's only resistant against fighting moves and ground moves, and pretty much every ground type is running something that can hit it for big damage, usually a rock move. If it runs into any of those, it's not going to have a good time. It's likely going to get one shot. So, and like Whimsicott, it also wants the Covert Cloak so that it doesn't get stopped from Tailwinding by a Fake Out. So Focus Sash, probably not something that you're going to be seeing a ton of. I mean, you could run it on that, and I'm sure it'd be decent, but while it does have more overall utility than Whimsicott, it's worse defensively, and I think that makes it the slightly worse user of Tailwind, the slightly worse support Pokemon. Although, for the record, I would rather use that over Whimsicott, and I like Whimsicott. I think it does more. It's just worse defensively, especially into a lot of common meta threats like Miraidon and Calyrex Ice. And you usually don't want to be wasting your Terra on a support Pokemon, so it's kind of stuck with that typing. Like not fully, but like if it's a support Pokemon, kinda. We got two more Pokemon to go over, and the next one in the list, probably the second worst one, which is ironic because this used to be one of the best support Pokemon in the game, and it has fallen pretty far from grace. It's still got its place in the metagame, and that is something to be proud of for a Gen 5 Pokemon. At this point, that's almost half the generations that it's been through. No, that is over half the generations that it's been through. But, being this low on the list, I think it's unfortunate, but I don't feel too bad because I also fucking hate this Pokemon. It's Amoonguss. Now, Amoonguss is it's actually the first Pokemon on the list since Incineroar to not have Prankster. It actually has the choice between Effect Spore, which grants a 30% chance to inflict a random status condition, not freeze, to your opponent when they hit it with a contact move, or it can run Regenerator, which heals it by 30% when it switches out. Honestly, they both have their utility. Regenerator is the better ability overall, but a lot of times in the VGC metagame specifically, you've got four Pokemon only, so you can't be switching as much as in singles play, and then it's also, a support Pokemon that's relatively bulky, and it runs Rage Powder, which is a Follow Me equivalent. Rage Powder forces your opponent to attack this Pokemon instead of your other Pokemon. So in that case, you'd actually want it to be, and just in general, you'd actually want Amoonguss to be taking moves, which means it's probably not going to get as many opportunities to switch out. And it would get utility out of Effect Spore due to it being hit a lot. It's especially good against Urshifu Water, because Surging Strikes hits 3 times, which means that's 3 opportunities to get affected by Effect Spore, and it also resists the Water type. Rage Powder is the main draw here, really. Its ability to redirect moves to itself allows you to do things like set up with your other Pokemon, like something like a Lunala or a Terapagos, or even like a Nasty Plot Calyrex Shadow. Or you can use it with like a Trick Room Pokemon. It's pretty slow, so there's a natural synergy there. Something like Calyrex Ice. And other than that, it also has one other very annoying tool, that being Spore. I believe I said in a previous one of these that there were 3 Pokemon that have access to 100% accurate Sleep move. I would like to correct that now. There are actually 4. I was thinking of Amoonguss, Parasect, and Breloom, and then Smeargle, but there are actually... Oh, I guess there are 5, my bad. I said there were 4, there are actually 5. Amoonguss, Parasect, Smeargle, Breloom, and then also I forgot about... Toadscruel. Toadscruel also has it. That's not relevant here. I just wanted to correct that. But Amoonguss does have Spore, which is a 100% accurate move that puts your opponent to sleep. It is a powder-based move, which means it doesn't affect grass types, and there's also an item that grants immunity to it, Safety Goggles. But being able to put your opponent to sleep is very, very strong, especially in VGC, where unlike in Smogon metagames, there's no Sleep Clause mod. So you can put as many of your opponent's Pokemon to sleep as you want, and then potentially you could just shut off your opponent's entire team temporarily. And especially in doubles, that's useful, because if you can sleep one of your opponent's Pokemon, even though Amoonguss wastes its turn, your other Pokemon doesn't. So it's very good in that way for its ability to shut off your opponent's Pokemon. The problems with Amoonguss, though, are, one, it's low speed. Like I said, everything before it on this list has Prankster except for Incineroar, which is relying primarily on Fake Out and then falling off pretty hard after its first turn when it gets a lot slower relative to what's around it. Amoonguss doesn't have anything like that. Rage Powder is a priority move. But other than Rage Powder, which is a move that will just cause it to get hit and die faster, it doesn't have anything that will necessarily move first. You can run it with Sludge Bomb or Giga Drain for some form of attacking, but it's also probably the least offensively capable Pokemon on this list so far. You're primarily clicking either Rage Powder or Spore with it. That's probably all you're going to do with it. And Spore getting off second isn't completely worthless, but it does mean it doesn't have as much immediate utility. And while Rage Powder does have priority and immediately get off, attracting a move to yourself, while useful, also means you die faster. So you can only really... It's not as splashable. You can only really use it if you specifically want to combo it with something else that really needs focus to be taken off of it. Like I said, a setup Pokemon like Terapagos or Calyrex Ice. And even then, your opponent... This isn't even necessarily 100% effective, because spread moves exist. Spread moves are moves that hit both opposing Pokemon, and they've been a thing forever, but there are a lot more of them now than ever before. Calyrex Ice and Shadow both have one. Groudon has one. Volcarona and Chi are running around with Heat Wave. Miraidon even is... I saw a lot of like Terra Fairy, Dazzling Gleam, Miraidons. Spread moves are kind of everywhere. And Rage Powder just doesn't do anything against those. So it's not able to effectively do the thing that it's mainly there to do, which is take attention off of your other Pokemon. Plus, as a grass type, it's weak to the primary, or two of the biggest spread moves anyway, those being Glacial Lance from Calyrex Ice and then Heat Wave off of like a Volcarona or a Chi-Yu. I think it also gets Wide Guard, but if you are Wide Guarding, then you're just... It's a lot more technical. You have to predict correctly, and if you get it wrong, you probably lose an entire Pokemon. And plus it's doubles, so your opponent could always play it safe and use a single attack with one and then a spread move with the other, so they kind of play both sides. You prevent one move, but you still take a big attack. And because of its low speed, it can't really do anything other than Rage Powder or pray that Wide Guard gets something done. Other than Spore, which will only be useful next turn. And even Spore is... Spore Stonks are kind of at an all-time low because of the prevalence of Miraidon, which, in addition to grass types being immune to Spore, so things like Rillaboom always having been able... Well, since Gen 6, grass types in general, and Rillaboom, since it dropped, having been able to ignore Spore. Now you've also got Miraidon running around setting up electric terrain, which makes almost all Pokemon unable to be put to sleep. So Spore becomes useless if Miraidon is in play. So basically Amoonguss does offer some unique things that nothing else on this list does, but it's got a lot of problems. And ultimately it's feeling kind of... There are a lot of ways to get around most of the primary good traits of Amoonguss. But there is one Pokemon that I feel is even more... I did see more of it than Amoonguss, but I really don't like it. I feel that it's not a good Pokemon. I don't like it. I don't like playing against it. I don't think it's good. But it is a relevant presence in the metagame and worth pointing out on this list, and that is Indeedee. Indeedee is a normal Psychic type, and it also does not have the Prankster ability. Rather, its ability is Psychic Surge. It sets Psychic Terrain. That makes it one of the terrain setters. Now, Psychic Terrain is the reason you use Indeedee. Like, that's pretty much the main thing. Yeah, the effect of Psychic Terrain is that it makes all priority moves whiff. Like, any priority move just does not work. This is mainly useful for putting a stop to Fake Out, as well as Prankster users. Like all of the Pokemon I mentioned previously, as well as Sableye and whoever else. I think Bandit gets Prankster. Is Bandit even in the game now? I don't know. Other than that, Indeedee primarily will just click Follow Me to do the same thing as Amoonguss's Rage Powder. It does have a better defensive typing relative to spread moves. It's not weak to fire. It's not weak to ice, and it's actually immune to Ghost for Calyrex Shadow Rider's Astral Barrage. But it also is... It does not have... Does it have any resistances? It only has one resistance to Psychic, and it also buffs Psychic moves with Psychic Terrain, so it essentially doesn't have any resistances. And I think it has a slightly worse defensive stat profile as well. Definitely does, at least on the physical side, so... Overall, it's about the same as Amoonguss defensively, maybe a little bit worse. But arguably a better user of Redirection. Other than that, the only thing it'll really do is it likes to click Helping Hand to give its allied Pokemon a boost to its move, but Helping Hand it's fine for what it is, but what it is a consolation prize on Pokemon that don't have anything better to do with their move. It gives a 50% boost to the damage of your opposing Pokemon's move, which is useful, but considering you're sacrificing an entire Pokemon's like turn to do it, it's usually you want something better to do with your turn. Like it's, I've tried Helping Hand, and conceptually I just don't think it's worthwhile most of the time. And other than that, that's basically it. It has Follow Me, it has Helping Hand, and it has its ability Psychic Surge, and that's all it really has to offer. And the main reason I think it's the worst support Pokemon in the current metagame is because obviously the main reason you're using it is Psychic Surge. If you take that away, it has a worse version of what Amoonguss has, and an ability that almost every Pokemon in the game. It has a worse version of what Amoonguss has, and Helping Hand, which is just not a very good move. And that's it. Psychic Surge is the main draw here. And Psychic Surge, calling Psychic Terrain can be very annoying for certain teams. The problem is Miraidon is very big in the current metagame, and if Miraidon switches in, it calls Electric Terrain. That will completely undo Indeedee's Psychic Terrain. Now, Indeedee can also cancel out Miraidon's Electric Terrain, but Miraidon isn't as reliant on Electric Terrain. Miraidon can get by without Electric Terrain. It wants it to be up, but it's not the end of the world for Miraidon if there's no Electric Terrain. And Rillaboom cares even less about its own terrain. It would like it to be up, but Rillaboom is another big presence in the metagame that can set terrain, which allows it to overwrite Indeedee's terrain, and if Indeedee overwrites Rillaboom's terrain, it does not give a shit. It's a slight power nerf, but, Rillaboom's... It's in a pretty decent place power-wise, even without terrain. It loses the priority on Grassy Glide, but it would still hit a Grassy Glide, it just wouldn't be priority. So because there are two other very, very good terrain setters that can cancel out Psychic Terrain, I think Indeedee into any team that has either of those is basically worthless. It's just a worse version of Amoonguss, and Amoonguss already wasn't that good. So that's why I think Indeedee is probably the worst support Pokemon in the current metagame. As I was making this list, I also realized there's one support Pokemon that I forgot to mention, and it would be remiss of me not to bring it up. Smeargle. Smeargle's a classic. He's a classic among classics. He's been doing his support Pokemon thing for as long as he's been around, basically. And Smeargle's gimmick. It has every move in the game. Its stats suck. Moody's actually a legal ability in VGC, which raises one stat by 2 stages, but lowers another stat by 1 stage at random at the end of every turn. But Moody isn't super relevant to Sableye's game plan, or to Smeargle's game plan most of the time. Primarily, it's just there for the ability to use any move. It likes to run Fake Out, obviously. Fake Out's a very good move. And it also does run Follow Me a lot. And Smeargle actually likes to run the Focus Sash item. Indeedee also does run this too sometimes, but I don't like Indeedee. That's really what it is. Smeargle likes to run the Focus Sash item to get more utility out of its Follow Me. Amoonguss usually doesn't. Indeedee does run that, but Smeargle will run the Focus Sash item to allow it to survive a hit after using Follow Me, and then it can potentially use Follow Me again to continue redirecting things. Now, Smeargle is well aware it's not taking more than 1 hit. So if you're not getting... So a lot of times it actually won't use Follow Me on the first turn. It'll either use Fake Out, or the other thing it likes to do is it'll actually use the move Decorate, which I believe was the special move of Alchemy, although I could be wrong about that. But Decorate is basically super coaching. It raises the attack and special attack of its allied Pokemon by 2 stages, and I believe it also goes through Protect. So it allows it to buff the shit out of its allied Pokemon, and then it'll typically rely on just its Focus Sash to allow it to actually do that. And then it can use Follow Me to allow its opposing Pokemon to get off a hit, or to get off more buffing or healing or whatever it needs. And then it also has access to Fake Out, which is just always generally useful. Now, Smeargle is a Pokemon that's never coming in late game, and it's never surviving that long. But it does its thing. It does a pretty good job. And, you know, I respect Smeargle a lot more than some of the lower Pokemon on this list. You know, it can be very dangerous if used correctly. That's about it. The only other relevant support Pokemon that I saw was Clefairy, and to be honest, it just didn't perform well. Like, I know Clefairy has Friend Guard, I know it has Follow Me, but I never saw a Clefairy perform well in the time I was playing VGC, and I'm a top 500 player, so, like, I know. I don't even think Clefairy is really worth talking about. But yeah, those are pretty much the support Pokemon in the current meta. Like I said, ranking them from best to worst, I would say that probably the best one right now is Incineroar. Grimmsnarl at number 2. Number 3 is honestly I'd put Smeargle at number 3 probably. That's where I would put Smeargle. I didn't mention before, but I think it's probably the third best after Incineroar and then Grimmsnarl. And then after that, you've got Whimsicott coming in at number 4 as the premier Tailwind setter. Then Tornadus as a good Tailwind setter with some other stuff to offer. At number 5, then number 6 is where I would put Amoonguss. And finally, number 7, the worst support Pokemon that does nevertheless still see significant play in the meta would be Indeedee. Oh, one more thing I should mention about Indeedee is Expanding Force is a move that exists. It allows Indeedee to have like relatively decent damage, and a lot of times other Pokemon will also run Expanding Force. Like I very rarely saw Indeedee actually click Expanding Force, but I did see like Lunala click Expanding Force. Expanding Force is an 80 damage move, but it becomes a 160 damage spread move if Psychic Terrain is active. And that is a very good move, but outside of Psychic Terrain, it's just okay. And like I said, the problems of there being other good terrain setters that remove Psychic Terrain really hampers its ability to make effective use of that. But yeah, that's the current VGC support Pokemon meta. That's about it.